Here's today's First Word Daily Devotion.
On May the 9th, we turn to Ruth chapter 2 through 4, so we're going to close the book of Ruth today, and we're going to see this beautiful book come into full light, especially the reason for its place in the canon. And by the way, speaking of its place in the canon, it's interesting that there are different places that the Hebrew canon puts Ruth. In our English Bible, of course, here it is in after the book of Judges. That's a chronological reading. But the Bible is not merely telling us a chronology so much as it is telling us a theology. And so in some books, in some canons, the Ruth is put at the beginning of the book of Psalms to let us know that David is the book of Psalms is about David. And in other places, it's right after the book of Proverbs to let us know that Ruth is indeed this Proverbs 31 woman. But let's turn our attention now to Ruth on May the 9th, to Ruth 2 through 4. And look at what happens here in verse 5. Here is Boaz noticing Ruth. He says, whose young woman is this? As well as he notices her again in verse 19. Blessed be the man who took notice of you. So Boaz notices Ruth. And then remember this. Why have I found, look at verse 10. Then she fell on her face, bowing to the ground, and said to him, why have I found favor in your eyes, that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner? But Boaz answered her, all that you've done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me, and how you left your father and mother and your native land and came to a people that you did not know. You remember what happened here in our reading from May 8th on Ruth chapter 1 and verse 19. The whole town was stirred because of them. So here the reputation of Ruth and Naomi, in particular, the reputation of Ruth has preceded her. Now, pay attention to verse 12. The Lord repay you for what you've done, and a full reward be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. And at mealtime, Boaz said to her, come here. And so Boaz, he invites her to dinner, and she ate until she was satisfied. Now, look down at chapter 3 and verse 4. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies, then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do. And she replied, all that you say I will do. Now, there's no reason for us to read into anything with some type of sexual reference here. Read the text closely, and you'll see exactly what's going on. Here is Ruth putting herself under the care of Boaz. Look at verse 9. He said, who are you? And she answered, I am Ruth, your servant. Look at this language. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer. Remember what we read in chapter 2 and verse 12? Here we have verse 12 saying, the Lord repay you for what you've done, and a full reward be given to you by the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. And of course we have this beautiful exchange where Boaz says that he's going to redeem her, but he realizes that there's a relative who's closer than he is that has the first option of redemption. So there's a little bit of twist in the plot, and so we're sort of left on pins and needles wondering whether or not this love story of Ruth and Boaz is going to indeed come to fruition. And we're left in the suspense, and the man says in verse 6, then the Redeemer said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption yourself. I cannot redeem it. And so here is the story of Ruth and Boaz. Providentially, God knits their hearts together, and Boaz redeems Ruth. And what's the purpose of redemption? Look at verse 10. It tells us to perpetuate the name of the dead. And so there is a resurrection tendency or a resurrection principle that we're to see in this unfolding story of redemption. And then look what happens here, especially at verse 11. We have a little bit of a blast from the past. Here is a memory of the way the Lord has dealt kindly with his people. We are witnesses. May the Lord make the women who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah. Look, they show back up in the narrative, who together built up the house of Israel. May you act worthily in Ephratah and be renowned in Bethlehem, and may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring that the Lord will give by this young woman. So connect those dots here. Rachel, Leah, Judah, seed, offspring. The Bible's telling us a story of redemption. Redemption of a day coming, of a son who's going to be born of the seed of the woman, who's going to crush the head of the serpent. And look at this. This is where it all comes into view. And the woman and the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi." They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now here's the way the book of Ruth closes. These are the generations of Perez. Perez fathered Hezron. Hezron fathered Ram. Ram fathered Amminadab. Amminadab fathered Nahshon. Nahshon fathered Salmon. Salmon fathered Boaz. Boaz fathered Obed. Obed fathered Jesse. And Jesse fathered David. And so here we have the whole focus of the narrative come into play. And the whole focus of the narrative is again on seed and offspring. Now, we didn't have time to turn to our New Testament reading today, but I hope that you will read it closely, because as we seeing this, Jesus, he is approaching his crucifixion. There again, we read the Bible always with redemption in mind. The story of Ruth and Boaz show us redemption.